All right. Good afternoon, everyone. For those who've not met me, I'm Dr. Avis Proctor, Harper College President. I'm delighted to welcome you to the first of several opportunities over the next few months that we planned around dialogue sessions on 4 areas: professional growth and service today, education in the 21st century, the changing landscape of work, as well as the changing landscape of our community. So there are plenty of opportunities for you to engage across these 4 opportunities, as well as the data summits. Those are identical data summits, so please plan to participate in at least one of them. Some of you may not be able to stay for a full session. You may want to return for the remainder of another session, but those, you need not attend all 4, but at least one of the data summits you're invited to participate in as well. So today's session focuses on professional growth and service. And maybe some of you did homework and read some of the readings that were on our strategic planning website. If not, you can do that after, before you give some input, perhaps. But in one of the readings, it's something that we already know, but I thought it was nice to bring out in our conversation this afternoon. In all of our interactions, we, as the employees here, help students decide who they're going to be as a member of our state, our country, and the world. Think about that global impact based upon all of our interactions with students. So we've assembled an esteemed group here today who will be responding to the overarching question: how does Harper ensure all employees to continue to grow and learn professionally? And that professional growth is linked to our service and how we serve our students and how we serve each other. That discussion will be guided by our moderator, Mr. Darrell Katz, who has worked with Harper, I understand, in similar capacities for several years. He will introduce the panelists in a few minutes. One of my key messages since I've arrived here is for you to get involved in our strategic planning process, and by the response today, I see that you're listening. These sessions are designed for you to listen and to respond and contribute. Offer your comments and suggestions. All feedback will be reviewed by our Strategic Planning and Accountability Committee using our shared governance system, which includes representatives from all employee groups. That committee is responsible, and I've charged them earlier towards the end of last month. They're responsible for bringing forth major themes that emerge from our processes with the planning process. At the end of the panel discussion, you'll have the opportunity not only ask questions of the panelists and offer comments via the microphones that are here in the room, and if there are any individuals who cannot get to the mics, we'll bring the mic to you. You'll also have an opportunity to use the online feedback form. These sessions will all be recorded and available online in HIP, so I urge you to inform your colleagues who are not able to be here today to go ahead and view the session and use that form online to contribute there as well. So welcome. I look forward to the discussion this afternoon, your thoughts on this very important topic of professional growth and service to our students and to each other. Thank you. Darrell?
Thank you, Dr. Proctor. Welcome, good afternoon. I'd like to consider myself to be a longtime friend of Harper College. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, and I've had the pleasure of doing a number of different projects and activities with faculty, staff, students, and your external constituents and the corporate customers that you work with. And I'm pleased to be here today. This is very exciting, and as we just heard, this is the first of what I think will be a very healthy series. You have on the back of your sheets, if you haven't discovered it, a short bio of each of our panelists, but I'm going to ask them if they'd very quickly go down the row and just reintroduce themselves to the room.
Career educational counselor for students here at Harper, and use of teaching, and also just feel like teaching extends way beyond the classroom.
Thank you.
I'm Jennifer Prowl. I work in the registry of the office.
Let's see if you hold on. Make a little adjustment here. There you go.
There you go. My name's Jennifer Prowl. I work in the registrar's office. I help service the students and faculty and community members who come to ask about registration.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Samir Desai. I'm the odd person out here, I think. I don't work here at Harper College. I work at Northwestern University. Worked for years in the corporate environment before that. For most of my career in the learning and training and leadership development space. And so happy to be here and share some thoughts and answer questions. I also live in the community, so love the Harper environment and community, and happy to be here.
Very good. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dina Ada. I'm an academic advisor in the A building. I am tasked with helping students achieve their academic goals. So course planning, any classroom issues that they are experiencing. I also teach as well the first year seminar Focus on Your Future, which is designed for undecided students.
Great. Thank you, Dina. Thank you all of you for being here today. I wanted to mention that Brian Collins, unfortunately not able to join us today. We'll certainly miss his input, but we still have a very esteemed group. I want to set the frame. I want to kind of set the parameters of where I think we want to get into our discussion today. I'm going to ask Samir to actually take on the first question from more of a global perspective. And the question is simply, what does professional development look like? What's effective? What is it? What's your viewpoint?
Yeah, what does professional development look like? My background is actually originally engineering, computer science, and then I got into learning and leadership development. And the way that I got into it is through education. I got a master's degree, which really was a pivot point for me to get involved with technology for learning, which then got me into the learning space. And so education is really close to my heart because I think it's a key way in which we as professionals can discover areas that we might not even know we don't know. And so as I've been in that field now, and then now with higher education for the last 4 years, is that I think the way I think about it is that there's kind of 3 spheres, if I were to draw it, right? So there's kind of, you know, what your interests are as an individual. Like, what do you like to do? What do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know what I want to be when I grow up yet, but hopefully I'm somewhere on the journey. Then there's, you know, what opportunities are there out there? So if I want to be a trapeze artist, there might not be a lot of opportunities out there in this area, right? But, you know, so what's out there? And then there's the skills that I have that when that gets intersected with what I'm interested in, what the opportunities are, that's like the sweet spot. I'm sure that's where when we do advising with students, we talk about that kind of stuff. But a lot of times it's not clear exactly what I want to do. It's not clear what the opportunities are. And sometimes it's not really clear then that I want to build some skills. And so the way I look at professional development is that every opportunity we have is an opportunity to learn, whether that's in a formal classroom environment or workshop, or whether it's projects we're on, or opportunities we have to learn from others. Those are all great opportunities for professional development. I think there's some things the institutional can definitely do to help with that. And a lot of it is on each of us to seek it out in the ways that we work with others and in the work that we do every day. So that's a lot of how I think about professional development.
Okay, good. Let me ask the rest of the panel, either concurrence, or do you feel like you have a different viewpoint, or do you go with this running definition? Jennifer?
Okay, I agree definitely. It is about developing the individual employee, but it also is about basically improving the bottom line for any organization, and it allows the employees to perform their specific jobs better. I also believe that the more an employee learns, then the better their position is for taking on greater responsibility within that organization. It also improves, did I say that? It improves effective and efficient performance on the job.
Very good, thank you. That opens an interesting door that I think leads to another good question. I'm going to ask the entire panel to respond, and I'll throw this to Dina first. Why is professional development important to you? Why is it part of a successful career?
Well, as far as the academic advising side goes, advising has been shifting over the last decade, and how what advising services are beneficial and effective when dealing with different student populations. So that professional development lets us know what the trends are and what trends aren't working. Advising is very rooted in theory, and the theory really just depends on the population and the area that we live in or that we're serving. So these professional development opportunities really help us in finding out what's working, what isn't, what we should be looking towards, and whose other programs we should probably look into mimicking. So that's where the professional development on the advising side looks like. I can also tell you that as far as a professional who is looking to move forward, whether it's in leadership opportunities, those professional developments would help with that, as far as developing mine or my peers' leadership skills so that we can take on more responsibilities and be more effective on campus, but outside of the campus as well, and represent our institution well.
Okay, great, thank you. David, let me ask you to pick it up. What would you say was important about professional development, and where do you see the opportunities for yourself?
Well, I think, especially speaking from a point of view of faculty, I think by definition, we're kind of experts in our field. So a lot of professional development, I think, for faculty is going to be learning to sort of push the limits. And I think as we practice our work, a lot of times it's easy to just practice in a bubble. And I think all different types of professional development, whether that's reading a journal or going to a conference or taking a grad course, these are all just attempts for us to sort of pop that bubble and see if there's ways that we can improve or, expand that expertise.
Very good, thank you. And Jennifer, why is it important, and what do you see as development opportunities for yourself?
Well, I find it important, well, it's important to me to improve my competency, my competency level and my efficiency. And when employees have different backgrounds and are learning on different levels, then it improves the whole performance of a department or an organization. It also helps the retention level of a particular organization. And for me, honestly, my next logical step, it would be to learn more of the technical skills, more data-driven I've always been interested in, that's something outside of what I do, interested in data and how it drives the bottom line. So how do we measure this? How do we measure the development?
Okay, very good, thank you. Samir, I'm going to ask you same question, but maybe in two parts. Take a step back and think about you personally. What have you done with professional development? What do you see as the things you want to still accomplish to use it for? And then I've got kind of a part B. I'll give you in a second.
Sure. Yeah, it's for me personally, I guess I wouldn't be in the field of learning and development if I didn't think it was important. Hopefully, not just for others, but for me as well. It does start with ourselves. And sometimes it can feel a little bit like after working for so many years that, you kind of know it. It's like, do I really need some additional training? I could probably just get it through the experience or whatever it is I'm doing. Things aren't changing that much in terms of work that I do. But the reality is that so much is changing around us. And so, and for me personally, what's been changing a lot is a little bit of the world around us and a little bit of my own perspective. So I'll share what that means. So in terms of the world around us, working in a much more global environment, much more diverse environment, a big part of my own personal growth has been around diversity, equity, inclusion, understanding what some of the challenges are. How can I be a better leader in those environments? How can I create a more inclusive environment? How can we use education and experience as a way to help promote inclusion with others? So I've been doing a lot of professional development in those areas, which has been a really interesting challenge because it's definitely not a straight line like learning Excel or something. It's not like that where you can just learn some skills and apply them. There's a lot of introspection to it, which can be a challenge, but it's exciting. So that's one area. And the other in terms of where personally where I want to be going is to be do more teaching. I do some teaching, love to do more of it, and so I've been doing a lot of training around facilitation and student interactions and how to create more engaging learning environments, and that's been a lot of fun as well.
Very good. So I want to draw a linkage between professional development, as we're talking about here in the room, and the benefit and the service we provide to students, our students. And again, I'm going to start with Samir, because I want to kind of get a large kind of platform picture from you. What do you see and what evidence is out there? What do you see that links the enrichment of the student that they're deriving from a staff of faculty and support and all types of, from the university and from the college, that supports that makes that a better experience for the student?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a lot of what Jennifer said originally, which is that when we are more proficient at doing our jobs, or maybe more innovative even in doing it, ultimately we and our teams can do better in providing services to our students, partnering with faculty and other members of the community. And so I guess that's the theory side of it. That should be that way. I think some of the things I've seen in practice, quantitative proof is always a little difficult, right, in the space of professional development. Is there a one-to-one ratio or something? But, one of the examples in some of the work we've been doing at Northwestern University is some work around different ways of solving problems. So higher ed and educational institutions like ours can feel complex. It can feel like a complex experience sometimes for students, or at least that's how it feels at Northwestern for our students at times, navigating the campus and so forth. And so we've been applying things like design thinking or other ways of doing problem solving to come up with more efficient processes that are end user centric, like with the student at the center of it. And so one of our schools there used that process, went through team exercises and development to think about problems in a different way and really streamline the whole onboarding process right after they've been accepted to the first day they start class. What is that whole process? How do they get notified of their schedule and all the other logistics that go into it, and really made measurable difference in the students' experience around it. So I think especially when it becomes a collective of folks do professional development, it can be pretty exciting for our students.
Well said. Dina, I'm going to ask you to take kind of the same question, a little bit different, but take from your personal experience what you've done with professional development, what your goals and what you're striving to do with your professional development, and link that to how that benefits students that you deal with.
So right now, my professional development is very packed. I'm currently in my doctoral program, but also just completed a fellowship at Harper, the Social Justice Leadership Certificate. And both of those have really helped in my confidence as being a leader, specifically the certificate here at Harper. It's made me, those professional developments have given me the tools, but also the connections of mentors that I can then, run my ideas past, help me design a more realistic training or a more realistic workshop. Then taking that back in with my students, again, to be able to say that, hey, we now offer these types of programs, these types of services. So being able to complete those tasks on the back end and then be more confident when I'm facing my students when they have those struggles of why they can't complete their classes. So I would say that those two right now, my doctoral studies is more on the administrative end of higher education. So that gives me more of that background knowledge, whereas having those professional development leadership-based programs at Harper allows me to be more centered on Harper's policies, but also Harper's population to better serve those students.
Right, great, thank you. Jennifer, David, same general question. Where do you see the link in what you're trying to accomplish with your personal development specifically, and what's the impact on the students?
Basically, from my perspective, I deal with them on a one-on-one basis. I deal with them on a one-on-one basis. So a lot of what I need to develop are empathy, being able to hear what's not being said, being able to help them navigate through the bureaucracy of the policies and the regulations and try to backstop some of it. As he had mentioned, we do need to find ways, other ways that we can help the students navigate through this process, especially new students who aren't familiar with, so that we're able to help them without causing more harm than good. So that's where I would feel basically professional development might need to be mandatory in emotional intelligence and empathy and listening, customer service oriented.
Mandatory from the standpoint that everyone must.
I'd often thought about a lot of what prevents us from being able to participate in more professional development are time constraints, human resources constraints. What we can do, maybe if we were able to develop online training that you could do in your own time, I think a lot more professionals would be able to participate in that so that they could develop the necessary skills that are needed to do your job more effectively.
You've opened an interesting avenue, which I want to get to in a second. I'm going to hold my thought. I made a note. David, I want to give you an opportunity. Again, linkage between professional development, students, thoughts?
Yeah, so I can give an example too. I, a couple of years ago, participated in a faculty international field seminar, and we went to Central America and also took a course and together. So, I mean, it helped me in a lot of different levels. So in my profession, you know, we work with students on personal issues, and a lot of times my biases and my privilege affects, you know, how I work with my students and can harm them, right? And so we have a large Latinx population, and I just felt like this would be an area where I could grow. And so we had the course, and it was multidisciplinary. So, but the course was set up in a way that we could all pursue kind of our own disciplines, with the goal of incorporating a global perspective. And you know, my focus was on cultural competency for counseling, and a little bit for advisors too. We worked together, and it was just a holistic approach. You know, we had the book. We had the lecture, and we had the class, but we also went to some of these countries in Nicaragua and El Salvador and so on, and were able to experience firsthand what that was like. And in the classroom also had a chance to present our ideas to our colleagues and get feedback on how this would work and how we can integrate those global perspectives into our courses as well. So that was really enjoyable, and for me to get to know some people in other departments and, you know, maintain those relationships and encourage each other, but also helped me certainly work with the students and be more sensitive to my own biases when I'm working with students that are different than I am.
Thank you, David. So I want to kind of loop back through, Jennifer, a couple of things you said. You were starting to take a turn towards types of professional development, and so I'm going to leave that there for a second, but I'm going to go loop around you actually to Samir. And from your vantage point, what are some initiatives, Samir, that you see that are effective vehicles, and Jennifer mentioned like online learning, but what are things that you're seeing, not just at Northwestern, but in your travels as an organizational development expert, that are effective ways to get at professional development?
Yeah. I think we should all do what you did, David, and go to Latin America and experience things firsthand.
Travel the world.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Sounds like an amazing experience. Yeah, Yeah, I mean, there's, professional development can take a lot of forms. It's interesting you brought up, online or e-learning options. As you can imagine with my technology background, I'm a big fan of that when used in the right way and when used as a supplement to other types of training opportunities. And so on its own, it could be effective, but may not be as effective as when it's integrated into something that's maybe there's some application that you do with a small group, you go learn online, come back to it. So online I think is a great supplement to it. We've done a lot to develop online training internally, but also partner with some third-party vendors like LinkedIn Learning, it used to be lynda.com, and really have taken advantage of that. But what we've done from that is something we call curation, which has been really interesting, where we curate or select the best of the best, not just from that source, but there's so much free content out there. Like when we would talk to people, how do you learn? The first answer they would give is, I Google it. Or I watch YouTube, right? And it's like, well, then do we need internal training? Can we just outsource it to Google and YouTube and call it a day? And the reality is that there's so much out there that, there's some good stuff out there, but there's also a lot of, right, clickbait and a lot of stuff that just you get sucked into and you end up spending an hour. It's like, what did I spend time on? And so what we've done is we've taken that and curated into what we call playlists and said, what's the best out there internally and externally? So for something like project management training, there's a lot of great stuff out there. So we curated and now we have a playlist and with books and readings and other things like that too. So that's a really great way. And then the other area that we've been focused a lot on, what I've seen is mentorship and job shadowing programs. Those are wonderful opportunities. I think maybe Harper's got some of those types of things, and sometimes they're not easy logistically to pull off. But being able to step into someone else's shoes or watch somebody else do their job or talk to somebody else who's doing some other kind of work to learn more about what they're doing or get some guidance on what you're doing. There's nothing like learning from experience or learning from others. So that's something else that we're trying to do more of at Northwestern, but I've certainly seen in the past be pretty effective.
Great thoughts. Thank you. I have a question I want to get to. It's, I think, an important question, but I have to sort of throw out a preamble or a pre-question, if you will. And Dean, I'm going to start with you. Thinking about professional development, thinking about what you're doing and trying to achieve personally, and then professional development in general, what would you say are the obstacles that stand in your way?
Cost.
Cost? Okay. What else?
Cost.
Cost and cost. Okay.
Aside from tuition, that's a whole other story, but conferences are very expensive. And we do, I do work in an employee group where we do get professional development funds, but that can run very fast. Conferences cost sometimes just entrance is $500 or more. But aside from cost, I would say the logistics of getting to the professional development. Oftentimes the great conferences aren't in the Chicagoland area. So if that means that that Harper needs to own having more professional development opportunities on campus, I think that that's something we should explore. And I know that we do. But one of the obstacles that's unique to academic advising in those trainings is oftentimes they happen during orientation week when we are all hands on deck and we're not able to attend. And for us who are so student focused and student facing, that would be critical information that we would love to be developed on.
Okay.
So I would say it would definitely be the cost, but the logistics of getting to them. Yeah.
Jennifer, what would you say are the obstacles? Any others that you face?
The ones that she just mentioned, cost is definitely one of them, and then time constraints, resources, which is one of the reasons why I would think that necessary e-learning on your own time, where you would be able to develop your skills, and I'm pretty sure there are. They have, like he said, they've got 1 million of them out there that you can learn, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
David, anything additional?
Sure. Yeah, I would add cost again.
I hear it.
Okay. And time time is money, so I guess they, but I think also, it's, I think a lot of people maybe see professional development as more like a supplemental, and it becomes an add-on to their job. And if they have a job that's already full, if, depending on where they're at in their own life, if they're just starting out, or if they have family, or if, they're empty nesters like me, that can also affect the commitment you can put into, professional development. So, yeah, I think there are obstacles like that. And I also wonder sometimes, because I feel like Harper has a lot of professional development opportunities, but not a lot of people necessarily are participating. And so I wonder if there's a culture change that needs to happen as well, in terms of creating that value, so that it actually becomes part of our job, not just, the day-to-day responsibilities.
Yeah, I want to come back to the idea of what's available and what's being taken advantage of, perhaps what not is being taken advantage of. But I'm going to go to Samir. There's a question that I feel comfortable putting you on the spot with this question ahead of the panelists who are part of Harper College. What's a reasonable expectation that an employee here, an employee at Northwestern University, or anywhere else, what's a reasonable expectation that individual employee should have of their company, of their organization, to create a pathway for professional development?
Yeah. Not sure why you have the confidence in me to answer that. I'm sure the answer. But no, Daryl. Yeah, I mean, as an institution, I mean, I really believe in the power of education. I'm sure we all do too, because of the field that we're in. And I think we certainly, at least I would say, and I think we'd all say, that learning doesn't stop once you graduate from some institution, right? I mean, of course not, right? Otherwise, why would people come back again? Why would we have continuing education, right? All the things that Harper provides and other institutions provide. So it is a lifelong thing. And I think organizations, one, it's good business, right? So as an employee value proposition or as a value proposition, people are hungry for learning and growth opportunities. And so I think if institutions don't provide it, they don't necessarily attract the best people out there, maybe, or the most curious, or the ones who want to grow and learn. And so that's something that I think is an obligation for the institution. But also, I think, as in terms of what's an obligation provide for staff and for others who work there, the word pathways, I'm not so sure the institution can provide a pathway per se. We used to try that a lot, like take this first, then do this, or here's where you can get promoted to. If you just take this training, you get promoted. The reality is that it doesn't work that way, right? It's very fluid. You can move sideways, you can move different departments, you can move up. Sometimes certain training is useful because you don't have the skills. Sometimes you're exploring something. So I think as an organization, it's more that we provide the culture point of an environment where people can learn, that we can provide time away from work for people to learn, just like people take time for vacation. That should be just part of the time that people can spend to learn. And to provide opportunities and funding as well, right? I mean, these things do cost money, even if it's online learning. So I think an institution does have to provide some kind of investment in internal or external opportunities as well.
Do you think, we talked a little bit about so many resources are at no cost or perhaps very little cost. And David had mentioned, some people perhaps don't take advantage of what's literally at their fingertips. Do any of you feel like there's missed opportunity, that there's things that are available that we don't take advantage of? Jennifer?
I think we do. There are quite a few opportunities, low-cost opportunities to develop through mentorship, job shadowing, cross-training. These are things that really don't cost a lot of money. And as to your question to Samir, That's something that I believe the managers, employees of their departments and divisions should take a look at and see what the training needs are in order to capture the needs and establish the goals to set the types of developmental programs that might be needed to help boost their productivity in their departments. From there, once you set your goals, you can figure out what the right training would be, the right software, the right online training, and move from there. But there are a lot of things that I think we could do personally within our own departments. We could reevaluate and see, well, here's a need. We have a need for this specific skill or knowledge in order to do our jobs a little better. Then the manager can go in and see what would be the best effective way to set the training.
Very good. Let me go back to an earlier thought about the impact on our constituents, which are the students. What do you see, and I'm addressing this to everyone on the panel, what do you see as the unique aspects? And let me frame it a little differently, perhaps. As compared to a service providing company that is trying to service their customer with all the right customer satisfaction, what do we view as being unique about our role in educational institute and providing that service for a student through professional development? Go ahead, please.
We
Jennifer.
have very, very competent people, teachers, administrators, and people who are sincerely concerned about the community and the students here at this institution. That's one of the advantages that we do have. Another advantage that we have is we have the resources to work with.
Mm-hmm.
We just kind of get caught up in our daily daily lives and duties without trying to take a look or step back and see where can we improve this. We get kind of comfortable and complacent in our positions. And instead of looking as to continually learning, continually growing, seeing where we can improve, then I think that's where we get caught up. We have a lot of different departments that do great jobs, but we do a lot of the same thing. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of overlap. We should be able to communicate a little better. This would help a lot of our students who get so confused after being sent from one department to the next department, and they told me to come here, but they told me to go there. I think we need to communicate the processes a little better than we do in regards to how to navigate the system.
Okay, very good. Dina, anything additional?
Can you repeat the question? I think I got it, but I want to make sure I...
Yes, so the unique, what I consider personally, the unique relationship between your organization, Harper College, and your students, which are your constituents, it's my belief that that's a different relationship than a company might have with their customers if they're selling a product or a service. But again, framed around professional development creates what for the students that's beneficial?
I think Jennifer really hit one of the big components is that it increases your knowledge on the technical side for me, knowing where students should go for transferring, what they need in order to be successful in their careers, but that empathy that you either have it or you need to learn how to be empathetic. And I think that professional development comes in when you're starting to learn. I go back to the cultural competencies, as David mentioned, is that allows for me to have a greater perspective of when I'm talking to the student that's sitting in front of me. Is there a cultural barrier that I need to become more aware in order to better serve the student? To check my own privilege before I work with the student that may be dealing with a personal or a cultural issue that I'm not very familiar with. So that, at least for me, working with the student one-on-one, that type of professional development on the cultural and diversity side is very crucial.
Very good.
If they're not comfortable with me, it's very unlikely that they'll come back and see me, which then could be a reason they don't come back and take their
Yeah.
classes.
True.
And I don't want to be that reason.
Very good, thank you. David, I just want to give you an opportunity. Anything additional you want to share?
Yeah, I think the word that sticks in my head, and I would agree too with Jennifer and Dina, I think Harper as an institution we're committed to our students and the success, and we really care about them. I think what professional development does, and the word that comes to mind is just increases our potency, what we can do with the gifts that we have and helping our students to be more successful and in their own careers and so on.
Thank you. So you're not just panelists today. I view you as models of the professional development process. So I'm going to ask you a question, and then we're going to transition and give everyone a chance to participate. Talk about what you plan to do personally in the near term and long term with your professional development. What's your roadmap look like? I know you haven't time to think about that. I'm putting you on the spot, but David,
Start with me?
yeah, because you gave me that look like don't start.
Start
Go
with
ahead.
me? Okay. Well, my short term is my long term.
Okay.
I think, but I would also say I do see I've gotten to a place in my profession where I'm pretty comfortable with what I do, so I'm looking for new ways to challenge myself. And I think the thing that Samir, and I might get off on a tangent here, but Samir said about the changing world around us, I think is really super important for those of us that have been around a while. I've just noticed that without professional development, my job gets kind of stale. And so some of the things that I'm thinking about are things that are pulling my area of expertise, but looking at ways that I can integrate that in new ways, in ways that I have passion and interest. So one of the things that I'm really interested in is experiential learning and being in the outdoors and being able to learn that type of thing. So, those are things that I'm looking for connections between emotional wellness, students who have, are really stressed and they need to have stress reduction, right? And these are connections to the outdoors. And so one of the things that I'm doing that is probably a little off the beaten path, but I'm going to a conference in November on experiential learning. And fortunately for me, I feel like I have, leadership that's supportive of that kind of experimentation and innovation. So, I think that's an important piece to that.
I have to ask, how did you know or how did you find that conference you're going to? Where did you discover it?
I've been a member of it for
Okay.
years, but just kind of vicariously got interested and learned about that stuff.
Yeah, I just want to interject. Sometimes great opportunities exist literally right before our eyes, just in things that we're already members of or we already subscribe. And we often, just in our haste, because we're all busy, I get it, we overlook that. So try not to. Thank you, David.
Sure.
Jennifer, short term, long term, how do you view things?
Well, short term, things change so much. I plan to learn more about Banner 9 because it will probably be coming out with a bigger and better updates shortly. One of the things that I would like to do is learn more from some of my coworkers and shadow them to learn more about the functions of the registrar's office, so that I could help decrease some of the workload, which they are under the gun quite a bit. But at this point in time, that's basically what I want to do, is learn more of the enrollment services functions, not just registrars, but also admissions and financial aid, so that I'm able to better service the students.
Great, and I have to, again, same point, I talk about resources literally at your fingertips and right next door would be
Right
your
next door,
colleagues, so not to be neglected. Thank you. Samir, I'm going to ask you, same question.
These, I want to hang out with David and do the stuff he's doing, I think. Yeah, short term is learning a lot about human resources, actually. So learning from my peers, I think I can be a stronger, better professional if I have a holistic view of all the ways in which we serve our people who work at the university, and maybe pick up some responsibilities beyond the work that I do today around learning and organization development. I think a little bit longer term, as I mentioned before, I have a passion for doing more teaching work. I've got this idea to, like, I always wanted to teach science ever since I was in high school over here at Fremd High School. I had a great physics teacher and found my way into higher ed eventually. Actually just this morning connected with a few faculty members on campus who teach science or teach history, because I'd love to bring it together. And I don't have academic background in it, but I reached out to them and they responded right away. I mean, it's really amazing. I'm sure they're busy, some quarters starting and all that, but people love to talk about what they do, is what I find. And so sometimes the resources, like you said, are right in our backyard in terms of connecting, and people are happy to share. I think the other thing is I've got 2 kids in college, 1 in high school, and I'm always learning from them, and to see the world a little bit differently than maybe my preconceived notions of the world. They challenge me, and I work to keep an open mind, even when it's not easy to do so, so I can learn from them.
Great. Another set of good ideas. Thank you. And Dina?
My short term really is to get through this doctoral program successfully, 2022. But thank you. A really big interest of mine is research. So really trying to develop my skills as to be a better researcher. That would also be in my long-term goals, is to be in more of a position that allows for additional research to, like I said, with advising in student development, it's very theory-based. So I'd really love to dive into the research behind that and to see what's been effective, what hasn't been. Where that leads, I'm not sure. So we'll see. But as far as it would be either the research or more, again, through the student development administrator role. So I would like to continue in my professional development to gain perspective on both.
Good. Thank you. I hope that we've sparked some thoughts, ideas, and questions. I want to open it up to the floor. And we have microphones set up on both aisles, about 2/3 of the way down. We have microphone helpers positioned there. And want to invite you to come down and ask any questions you have about anything you've heard so far. And our panel is happy to provide their best thoughts on that.
Hi there. I'm going to tilt my head up. And I actually have 2 questions, one quick one.
Okay.
And one longer one. Yeah, that works. The quick one is about the issue of resources and emphasizing professional development. And it seems to me that with all the teaching responsibilities and shared governance responsibilities and all the other responsibilities that we have, that professional development is one of those things, but the question is how to fit it all into a day-to-day existence without going completely mad. We can, I think, talk about the difference between encouraging people to do professional development or pressuring people to do professional development on top of all of their other responsibilities. And if it becomes a question of pressuring, how do we keep things sufficiently sane so that we're not putting people into a situation where they can't possibly do everything that they want to do? That's question number 1. Question number 2, yes. I'm sorry.
Can we take it one at a time then?
Sure.
Okay. So just to summarize, what I think I'm pointing out from the question is the question of resources, available resources or not. Time. Yeah. And then the line between pressure and encouraging.
Right.
And where do we put that line?
We want to reward professional development, but we don't want to make it impossible to do everything that we're required to do.
Got it.
Without burning out very quickly.
Okay.
So that's question number 1.
Thoughts, comments, ideas?
Oh, okay.
Jennifer will take
No one
that.
wants to say anything. I talk all the time. I think that was one of the things that I had mentioned earlier, because, yeah, time is limited, resources are limited, and what a manager might want to do is find the interest and the need in their specific department, and hopefully develop a training program or develop a program that the employee could do, or employees could do on their own time. When it's, say, for example, when they're at home after dinner, maybe sit down, do a little e-learning, and still get a certificate and still make an accomplishment. This is what we've done, and at the same time improve the productivity in the department, because this is something that we need to improve in our production. So that would be something that you would talk to your individual employees to see where their interests are, what their needs are, and where you might be able to incorporate it.
I wonder if I might, with all due respect, suggest that as a teaching faculty, my time at home is already very heavily occupied with my teaching responsibilities. I can't tell you how many times my husband has yelled at me to come back to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning because I'm still grading papers. So that time after dinner simply isn't there.
Can I, I'm hoping, Samir, you have something to say, but I think it's a value that the institution has to put on professional development and make it part of our job. I mean, to just put it really simply. I do think, like in our department, one of the things that we try to do is it's not a formal thing, and I wish it were, but to have more of a community of practice with my colleagues and have, so if I wanted to go away on a conference for a week, say, then I would have a group of colleagues. I know this isn't true for all faculty, don't necessarily have 5 or 6 people that they can kind of work with. But those that do, maybe that week, that faculty will take care of those those sections or whatever. And then that teacher can go off on the week. And I think, it's also really important for your dean to know you really well and to be able to support you. And I think I did like about what Jennifer said was just kind of having a professional development plan, especially for our new faculty. I mean, I think that should happen day one. And the deans sit down with their new faculty and say, hey, what are you all about? And then have a regular check-in, not weekly, we're not talking about anything like that, but so that they know, where their faculty are at and what their interests are, and give them some freedom also to explore, explore their field in depth, not just the width, right? We all, there's this national push, right, to streamline our courses and to get students through really quickly. But we're missing out on the depth, which is stuff that students can learn. They can get general principles from that kind of thing too. And I wish that we would, as an institution, let our faculty really experiment and innovate a little more.
Any others?
You had a follow-up question?
Well, it's related to David's
Point.
For teachers, at least in many fields, it's not true in all fields, but in many fields, certainly mine, there are 2 kinds of professional development. One is pedagogical professional development, where I'm learning to be a better teacher, and others are, the other basket, if you will, is professional development in my own specific discipline. Now, in my own, in pedagogical methodology, I think I'm a better teacher than I was when I started, just by dint of experience. But in my own field, there's a tendency, once one has one's degree, if one is not going to conferences and publishing and doing all those sorts of things, is to fall back into the bubble that David was talking about earlier. I know what I know. In Sumerian archaeology, here's what's true. But Sumerian archaeology is changing day by day, and I would love to have more opportunity to make that a part of my daily professional development. I'm not saying that one is more important than the other, but one is the pedagogical methodology is easier to find in this environment than the professional development in one's own field. And there is somewhat, it's easy, it's more convenient, it's less costly to look for pedagogical professional development than it is in one's own field. Those conferences tend to be very specific in one's field, and those are the expensive ones. So I'm trying to figure out how the institution can help me in both directions. That's my second question.
And I want to embellish that slightly, so to correct me if I've got this not correct. Are you asking about from a cultural standpoint or from a motivation standpoint with that other half?
Both.
Okay.
Culturally, I think we're all encouraged to do both. I have never felt discouraged from pursuing my own field, but in terms of resources and in terms of, it's simply easier for the institution to offer me opportunities in pedagogical methodology simply because we can take GECs, we can take general educational courses that send us in the right direction pedagogically. They can't offer me a GEC in my field. It's just not practical.
Okay. We talked about some various ways to get at it from this direction, that direction. Anything that we can add that makes it more feasible to get at your personal development
Maybe
plan?
I'll just take, I certainly not sure where the content on Sumerian archaeology would come from. You would probably know better than me, although it sounds really interesting. I'd love to learn more about it. Yeah. And so, ultimately those that are experts in the field, such as yourself or whatever someone's an expert in their discipline or the work that they do, if it's finance or something else, they typically know best where that content or where that new knowledge and research lies, right? Whether it's from others or conferences or readings. And so, as a university or as an institution, it's not necessarily easy, nor do I think it's necessarily the institution's job to provide like a catalog or like a collection of all these resources out there. But I completely get that the time and the permission maybe to do that research and find those resources are a little difficult. And I think I will echo a little bit what Jennifer and David said, that I think it does come out to planning it. Now that may seem like, it's like a simple thing, but it's really hard because most of the time in life, not just in the work we do, what gets in the way is actually planning something and making a commitment to it. Like, for example, I want to work out, I want to actually strengthen, and I know resources out there. I can question it or say that doesn't work for me, but they're out there. It's really making the commitment to it, and then maybe my work and my wife giving me permission and time to go work out. And so, it's, or at least I can think that. Ultimately, it's probably still me, right, that has to do it. So, I think it's planning it and scheduling it. Like we take vacations. Sometimes we fall ill or somebody falls ill and they're not at work, and somehow we manage. Like life will go on. I started teaching at higher ed, and I totally get grading papers at midnight. Like somebody said, what do you like, what don't you like? I'm like, I love the student interaction, I hate the grading. And they told me, well, you can control what assignments you give. I'm like, oh yeah, wow, that's true. Maybe not, maybe it's part of the curriculum. But so, there's a lot more in our control than maybe we think there is, but ultimately, getting the department chair support, getting the dean support, getting the supervisor support, and scheduling it, like on a Friday afternoon for 2 hours, or 3 months out in a break, scheduling one day, goes a long way towards making it happen. And then making it a purposeful conversation with those other ones to be able to say, what are resources, what can I tap into, if I do need some support for coverage, if I do need some support for money, can I get some of that?
Great.
That's what I found works.
Very good. Thank you, Samir. Appreciate it. I'm going to go to the other side of the room. We have another question on this side.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Catherine Powell, faculty in the Adult Educational Development Department, and also just coming off the whole last strategic team, I was on the employee skills team, and I would, just as a recap, because this is all about strategic plan, so just looking back a little bit about what we accomplished, I think for the first year or so, we were just kind of saying, we were thinking outside the box, what else do we need as employees, or what would help us? There's so much here, we have a fantastic academy. We've got communities of practice. I think everyone's kind of been saying, and also Judy was kind of saying, where do you have time to fit it all in? So we were we started doing a data website where you could go and, hey, what's for my employee group, what is there? We thought maybe that would be worth our time. Then we said, wait, maybe we just need to wait for the other strategic goal teams to figure out what they're doing, and then we're going to bring it to the employees. So we thought that would be our task. Is that kind of right, Roger? In any case, and then I think we really we coalesced around SOAR, Search, Onboard, Achieve, and what's R? Realize? Realize? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that whole thing. And then, so the last part of the employee goal team was really all about getting that out with new employees. So a crop of new employees comes in. Doesn't matter if they're a janitor, if they're full-time faculty, whatever. They were all going to have a little taste of what SOAR is and what part do you play in helping students reach that. So that's kind of recapping. Do you approve of that, Roger? Okay. So anyway, that was, so now I'm just thinking, looking back and saying for this new strategic plan, are there any, what are we missing? What is the new opportunity? What is that, maybe that we haven't captured? What haven't we done that employees all need to, and also, sorry, We Are Harper. That's another one that all came out about the community, sorry, what was it? Caring, what is it? We care. Yeah, you matter, we care, that kind of thing. And coming from adult ed, I have to wear that hat now. We're hoping that this is the year that we can say adult education, in other words, underrepresented, underemployed, second language learners, the most vulnerable people in the community, perhaps undocumented, or maybe people who just didn't make the cut to get into the career pathways. How can we support them? So in my mind, my goal for this strategic plan would be for all employees at wherever you are to understand that there are these swaths of people in our community that aren't making it, on-ramping, onboarding, they're not soaring. And how can we all work collectively to help them soar? So I guess that's my little hat, but there might be others, there might be other populations that are just not making it, not getting to the R part of the soar. And it would be great, no matter how busy you are or what employee group you are in, that we can work collectively to get that happening. Because everything, it was great what happened with the last strategic plan. There was Promise Program, this, that, but our population still didn't quite make it on the ramp. And so there may be others. So I'll just leave it at
Okay.
that.
Isn't that, when you say, I'm addressing the panel, that professional development has to incorporate the strategic plan because they have to go hand in hand. You're not going to go off, I would think, on a professional development journey if it doesn't tie back to what the organization's strategic plan would be. I mean, does that make sense? And so it becomes, I think, a pillar of what we're trying to accomplish. And your nodding heads tell me that you're buying into that.
I'm sitting here thinking that the communication, the coordination, the working in the different silos. Because to be honest, this is the first I've heard of SWOR, to be honest. And how we communicate information throughout the institution is vital to success in
Yeah.
any strategic plan that we would institute.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Hi there. I'm sorry about the microphone. She had to hand it off to the interpreter, but I am using American Sign Language, so that's why I have an interpreter interpreting for me. My name is Robert, for those of you that don't know. I really appreciate what Samir said and your perspective. All of you had a great perspective, but in regards to how we can engage students, in my job, I work with students that have disabilities. So a part of my job is to think of multiple solutions to one strategy or one problem. For example, I have some students that have dyslexia, meaning they don't necessarily read visually text. So by disclosing that they have dyslexia, that qualifies them for a certain accommodation that our office can convert books and provide them with audio text. So in several years of working this way, I have noticed that people or individuals with or without disabilities learn in multiple manners. For example, someone may be more visual or someone may be more auditory as a learner. At the same time, there may be preferences that are concentrated in doses and preferences that are smaller in doses, and some of the principles of accessibility seems to apply to the general public. For example, closed captioning. It really facilitates learning, and it's more effective in an environment that is only auditory. So I just was wondering if, Samir, you had any experience with that in terms of providing different opportunities for learning the same thing they may be learning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and others may have some answers there too. Yeah, it's a really interesting insight that, whoever the individual is may have different ways in which they learn best, right, through different types of mechanisms. I guess my experience on that comes a little bit more from the corporate environment that I was in, because we had employees all over the world with all different types of backgrounds. And their learning styles were definitely something that we would take into account. And we did a lot through, I can't say that I have a lot of experience with it, so I think it's more of a question in my mind, certainly, than I have answers to how to take into account different types of learning styles or different ways people learn. But what we did find is that a lot of taking something that was traditionally done through reading or through a presentation and making it audio and or video was certainly a big part of what our journey was when I was in the corporate world. So we did a lot of work around that, making things available in video and then in audio as well, and then including things like closed caption in the work that we did. But I think there's a lot more there to explore, quite honestly, than I've had the opportunity to do. I don't know if there's other perspectives.
I agree. And I've come across some old research papers that say if you provide instruction in multiple modes, multiple modalities, it can be a little overwhelming to the brain. But I find that not necessarily be true. So I just wanted to see if you had any comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to say, just comments on what Robert was saying. As far as professional development goes, students with disability at least in my experience, tends to fall through the cracks, especially when we're talking about diversity trainings. There oftentimes isn't a lot of emphasis on students with disability and the different modalities that might be appropriate in applying into the classroom. Just as someone who has been teaching off and on, but also in advising, if we are talking about professional development opportunities, I would like to see more of how those learning strategies can be applied into the classroom, but also to take, at least for me, and just like Samir said, you speak for you first, right? And that we're learning for us first is if I get that, those accommodation emails, right? That it becomes more of my comfort level is that much higher, that I would be able to speak to the student or build a classroom environment where the student is very comfortable coming and talking to me about their accommodations rather than feeling they have to introduce it through an email first. So I would encourage that we start looking at that type of training at Harper and professional development to help those students so that they come into a classroom and they're ready to go and they're encouraged to speak with me about those accommodations rather than trying to hide behind it first.
Right. Go ahead, Dave.
So what I kind of went in a little different direction with that, but I thought one thing, what Robert was sharing and what Catherine was sharing to me was kind of similar in that these are two populations that we haven't really recognized, and it's not part of our strategic plan. And I think if it were, then there might be more consistent addressing of those issues. And so it seems to me we need to look at that mechanism and see if we're getting the feedback we need so that we can adapt and address these issues as they come up. And then the other thing that I took from it is maybe we have faculty and staff also that have different learning styles, so we need to maybe look at that too in terms of our professional development and see if there are ways that we're kind of missing the boat there too.
You're good, thank you. We have a question over here. Sir?
Hi, Dave Braunschweig, faculty member in Computer Information Systems, and I also wanted to make the connection between this strategic plan and the last one. I was co-chair of the stewardship committee or team last year, and professional development or professional growth is great. It's hard to argue that we don't need it, but we also need priorities. If we're going to do more professional development, what are we going to stop doing in order to make that possible?
Okay, great question. And I guess I want to open it up. I would say, is it really a zero-sum proposition? You've got to place and replace something? How do we get at that?
I wouldn't say it was a zero-sum proposition, but I would say that for whatever the initiatives are, we would need to make sure that it would be sustainable, something that you could take and use it through the development and the production of the university, the whole cycle. Not something that, because that's something that we have done. I was on that committee as well. And we have initiated quite a few different initiatives that, for whatever the reasons were, did not bring about the desired results. And cost was quite costly. They're still going on, a few of them, that we do out of just having it done. Now, do you say getting out in the community and being known and goodwill, can you measure that? Yeah, you can, but does it really affect the students' productivity, and how much does it cost per credit hour? Yeah.
Some tough boundaries.
That's something
yeah.
that needs to be considered. If the programs and the professional development programs that are instituted are costing us more than what we get back on return, then yeah, that's something that needs to be considered, definitely.
Very much so.
And that's the need. That's why I say we have a need to know, how do we measure this?
Excellent point. Dina?
I really want to acknowledge I acknowledge the difficulty that comes with professional development for faculty, and I believe that that is a different perspective that we do. It's easier for me to go on these conferences. I block out my schedule. I'm not seeing students that day, and I go and I have my time to do so. Whereas I understand faculty may not be able to be granted that release time to go and attend or do the online types of modules at home. So I'd like to just make sure that when I speak on professional development, I would encourage that we have a similar panel for faculty to address those concerns, because it is a different avenue for them. So, however, I do think, and I would echo what Jennifer has said and what David have said, that it would then go back to the department. And I would encourage then those managers and department chairs, if possible, to then consider what would be appropriate professional development to grant that release time. But I know that some of us teach, David has said, and I do as well, and as does Samir, but I really think that we need to have another conversation specifically because of the load that they have and the requirements that they have for their classrooms.
Thank you. Roger?
So first a statement and then a question. I once worked for a college president who had painted above his office door, "Help people grow." So every time he walked out of his bubble, he was reminded that was his job. And I would suggest that all of us who are managers, supervisors, administrators, we have that obligation to help our employees grow. Our employees have the obligation to take a personal stake in it. And so if the two can come together, I think that would be really a beautiful thing. My question is this: as a manager, as a supervisor, I think of professional development as preparing for something that I don't even know yet. So think about those skills that the job doesn't exist. And so my question might be to Samir and to others is, how do I prepare for that next thing? What am I developing for? Because when that time comes, I want to be prepared, because if I'm sort of starting the development after it's here, I'm kind of late to the gate, and it's probably going to be the next thing. So just how do I prepare for the thing I can't see?
Good question. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I love what you said before about managers, role in helping others grow, and our individual sense of responsibility, or taking on the responsibility to do the work necessary to grow. As managers, one of the things that getting back to the focus point aligned to strategic priorities, just to comment on that, is we're going through some of that at Northwestern, and we focused and said, one of the things we need to do is strengthen our managers. We have wonderful people that are very skilled in different jobs. What got you here isn't necessarily what will get you there, and sometimes we don't train people on just the things that are necessary around delegation and effectively managing work that will then allow maybe for some freedom to be able to do some of the other things necessary to help grow people. And so, we made that a priority, and we aligned resources to that. We had to make some trade-offs as well, take away some resources from some other areas, but decide to focus on that. In terms of, seeing what's next and seeing around the corners, I guess, just my personal experience in coaching others is like the network, connecting with other people, taking the time to have conversations and ask questions, and doing that in some purposeful way. When it comes to networking, I went through a training program once, kind of in my early days of going into management, and I used to not really like that term, because it felt like I got a network because I want something in return, and felt a little sleazy, kind of like, what am I doing here? And going into a forum like this, and I have to go talk to people, I don't want to do that, I don't know. And what he told me was, he was led our diversity area at the time, was, meet people because they're interesting. No other reason. Everyone's interesting. Everyone's got something. And that's so true. You just meet people and ask them questions, everyone's interesting. And so that really freed me up to just meet with people. And I think, Roger, that's one of the best ways, because when you meet people and oh, you're doing that, or you're learning that, or it's wow, maybe that's kind of interesting for me to learn something more about. And then you can pursue other paths on how to do it.
Good, thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, I was prepared for that question, right? You know, the professional development can be incorporated with our live production. It's a one-on-one training. It's what we learn in our daily work lives. And encouraging employees to learn as a group collectively, sharing information, then it sharpens their skills. And it can boost the group's knowledge, the whole group's knowledge as a base. It makes them more agile and able to go ahead when something changes or something comes around. It makes them able to make those decisions for that next position.
Well said. David?
Yeah, Roger, I appreciate you talking about just what I sort of view as a shared responsibility. And I think and maybe this would help with that, you know, how do I prepare for the future? But when I think a supervisor and a person that's working for that supervisor have a good relationship and they're open and honest with each other, that future is a little clearer, and I think that's just really critical in professional development, that both sides are working together for that person's development.
Great, thank you. We've come to the close of our time, and I want to thank our panel for outstanding input. Thank you. I want to thank each of you for taking your time to come and be part of our discussion. I'm going to put up a screen because you're invited to give feedback, and that feedback is here. And we'd love to get your thoughts on this. And I think I'll indulge the panel if you can stay a few minutes. If you have any specific questions that you want to bring down, feel free to come and visit us. But thank you and have a good afternoon. Take care.